A man's true character is revealed not by the wealth he displays, but by the secrets he keeps. For Julian Thorne, a New York millionaire, his secrets were about to collide at 30,000 feet. He boarded a private jet to Geneva for the business deal of a lifetime, his beautiful young mistress, Chloe, sipping champagne by his side. He believed he was flying toward a future of unlimited power, leaving his quiet, predictable wife, Amelia, behind in their Upper East Side apartment. What he didn't know was that his wife wasn't just at home. She was waiting for him in Geneva. And she wasn't just a wife, she was the secret investor about to decide his fate. The penthouse apartment on Park Avenue was silent, but not peaceful. It was the heavy, oppressive silence of things left unsaid, a stillness that hummed with the fluorescent glow of the skyline. Julian Thorne stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, a tumbler of expensive Macallan 25 in his hand, the amber liquid catching the lights of Manhattan. He was a man carved from ambition, his reflection showing a sharp suit, a face that was still handsome, but hardening with the constant pressure of financial warfare. His company, Thorne Dynamics, a once dominant logistics empire, was bleeding. It was a slow, internal hemorrhage that no one on the outside could see. But Julian felt it every day in the frantic pulse in his wrist. This trip to Geneva was everything. It wasn't just a deal, it was a lifeline. "Must you pack so much, Amelia?" he said, not turning. His voice, usually so commanding in boardrooms, was clipped and impatient in his own home. Across the cavernous living room, Amelia Thorne, formerly Amelia Redwood Vance, paused, her hands resting on a simple, elegant leather suitcase. She was the woman he had married 12 years ago, the perfect wife. Demure, intelligent, and most importantly, from a family whose name had opened doors his own disruptive tactics could not. She was, he thought, the ultimate status symbol, one that had conveniently settled into the background of his life. Her appearance was one of carefully curated simplicity, classic cashmere, simple pearls, hair always impeccably styled. Tonight, she looked tired, but her eyes, the color of a winter sea, were clear and observant. "It is a charity gala, Julian," she replied, her voice soft. "My sister is hosting. It requires a few changes of wardrobe." "Right. The gala." He scoffed, swirling the scotch. "While you're sipping lukewarm champagne and discussing auction items, I'll be saving this company. Our company." Amelia's fingers tightened on the suitcase handle. "I am well aware of the importance of your meeting, Julian. You've mentioned it." "Mentioned it?" He finally turned, his face a mask of incredulous stress. "Amelia, this isn't just a meeting. This is Vanguard Equity Partners. This is the AR of Vance. Do you have any idea who that is?" "A notoriously private investment consortium, I believe. Very little is known about its principal," she said calmly, reciting the facts she had read. "Very little is known?" Julian laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "They're a ghost, a $1 trillion ghost, and they've finally agreed to a face-to-face. Their capital injection won't just float us, it will make us untouchable. I've been chasing this for 2 years. 2 years. And you're packing for a party." He saw the flicker in her eyes, but mistook it for hurt. It was, in fact, pity. "I wish you success, Julian, truly." "I don't need wishes, Amelia. I need focus, which is why," he said, walking over to his own sleek aluminum Rimowa briefcase. "I'll be taking the Gulf Stream tomorrow morning. I need to be sharp. No commercial flights, no distractions." "Of course," she said. "I'll be leaving for Boston around the same time. I'll have Thomas take me to LaGuardia." "Fine." He finished his drink in one aggressive swallow, the ice clinking sharply. He strode past her, deliberately not making eye contact, and disappeared into his study. The heavy door clicked shut. Amelia stood alone in the vast room for a long moment. The mask of the dutiful wife dissolved. Her posture straightened, the weariness replaced by a cold, sharp energy. She walked over to the window he had just vacated, looking down at the city that was her chessboard. He was so consumed by his own reflection, he never saw the player staring back. She pulled out her own phone, a simple, unadorned device. Not the one Julian knew. This one held her real life. She sent a single, encrypted text to a number saved as Mr. Harrison. The reply was instantaneous. She deleted the exchange. She looked back at the closed study door. He was in there, she knew, not just reviewing spreadsheets. He was calling her. Inside the study, Julian had his back to the door, his voice now a low, intimate murmur. I know. I just got away. Yes, she's going to Boston. Some charity thing. Perfect timing. Of course you're coming. Did you ever doubt it? Pack your best. I want you to see Geneva. A pause, and he smiled, a genuine, predatory smile Amelia hadn't seen in years. Don't worry about the wife, Chloe, he whispered. She has no idea how the real world works. Now, tell me what you're wearing. Outside, Amelia closed her suitcase. The click of the latch was loud and final, like the cocking of a gun. She had packed for a gala, yes, but the gala was in Geneva, and she was the guest of honor. The early morning light was a cold, metallic grey, washing over the sterile luxury of the private tarmac at Teterboro Airport. Julian Thorne, immaculate in a dark Loro Piana travel suit, stepped out of his black Escalade and onto the steps of the Gulfstream G150. He had given Amelia a perfunctory, cold kiss on the cheek hours earlier in their lobby, a pantomime of a goodbye for the doorman. He had felt the familiar, brief sting of guilt, followed by the immediate, intoxicating rush of freedom. He was escaping. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne." The pilot, a man named Peters, greeted him. "We are wheels up in 15. Flight path is clear to Geneva." "Excellent, Peters. We have one more passenger," Julian said, checking his Cartier watch. As if summoned, a red Ferrari screeched to a halt on the tarmac, a flagrant breach of protocol that Julian found, in this instance, amusing. The door opened, and Chloe Vance emerged. She was 24, a former intern in his marketing department, and possessed a beauty so vibrant it was almost violent. She wore white leather pants, a sheer blouse, and sunglasses that covered half her face, her blonde hair streaming behind her. She was the antithesis of Amelia, loud, demanding, and utterly, nakedly ambitious. "Julian, darling," she squealed, running to him and kissing him hard. "I thought you'd leave without me. This traffic was a nightmare." "I wouldn't dream of it," he murmured, his hand sliding down her back. He felt the familiar jolt of possession, the thrill of the taboo. Taking her on this trip was reckless, but it felt like a power move. It was a celebration of the success he was about to secure. "Is this it?" she said, looking up at the sleek jet. "It's nice. Is it new?" "It'll get us there," Julian said, guiding her up the steps. Inside, the cabin was a sea of cream leather and polished walnut. A flight attendant was already pouring champagne. Veuve Clicquot. "Thank God," Chloe breathed, sinking into a seat. "I cannot wait to get out of New York, and away from, well, you know." She made a vague gesture, dismissing his entire domestic life. "To Geneva," Julian said, clinking his glass with hers. "And to Vanguard." "To us," Chloe corrected, leaning in. "When this deal is done, Julian, you have to promise me. No more hiding. I am so tired of being your secret. I deserve to be seen." "When this deal closes," Julian said, the champagne and the altitude already making him feel invincible, "I can do anything. anything I want. He saw his future, a new dynamic life with Chloe, his company revitalized, the old Amelia surgically and cleanly removed. As their jet taxied and soared into the sky, banking east over the Atlantic, another far more discreet departure was taking place from LaGuardia. Amelia Thorne, in a simple but impeccably cut navy trouser suit, sat in the muted, anonymous comfort of a first-class commercial cabin. She had her laptop open, but the screen was angled away from her seatmate. She wasn't reviewing charity auction items. She was analyzing the final debt-to-equity ratios of Thorne Dynamics. Her phone, the other phone, vibrated. It was Mr. Harrison, her COO at Vanguard Equity Partners. Subject is airborne. Manifest confirmed 2 passengers, J. Thorne, C. Vance. Amelia's face remained impassive. Chloe Vance. He had actually brought her. He had brought the intern he'd been sleeping with for 8 months, the one he thought she knew nothing about, to the most important meeting of his life. The audacity was breathtaking. It was so Julian. She had known about Chloe for 6 of those 8 months. The private investigator's report had been clinical, thorough, and heartbreaking. But the heartbreak had cooled quickly, solidifying into something harder and more useful: resolve. Her marriage was a casualty. Her family's legacy was not. Julian believed she was Amelia Thorne, the quiet wife whose family money was a passive, abstract thing she barely understood. He had no idea that her father, Arthur Redwood Vance, had not just left her a fortune. He had left her an education. He had trained her since she was 16 to take over the real family business. Not the public-facing Redwood Foundation charity work, but the silent, powerful entity of Vanguard Equity Partners. ARV was not some unknown man. It was Amelia Redwood Vance. Julian had been frantically trying to get a meeting with A.R. Vance for 2 years, leveraging his connection to the Redwood family, never once imagining the Vance in the firm's name was his own wife's. He thought her maiden name was just Redwood. She had carefully, surgically, kept that part of her identity separate. "Another coffee, ma'am?" the flight attendant asked. "Please," Amelia said, offering a polite, distant smile. "And a bottle of water. I have a long day of meetings when we land." As Julian and Chloe dozed in their pressurized cabin, high on champagne and arrogance, Amelia worked. She cross-referenced the assets Julian had leveraged for his last-ditch loans. She saw the properties, the stock portfolios, the art. And she saw it. He had leveraged the deed to their Park Avenue penthouse. Not just his half, her half, too. He had forged her signature. She closed the laptop. The quiet hum of the Boeing's engines was the only sound. The fog of her sadness was gone, burned away by a clean, white-hot rage. He wasn't just trying to save his company. He was trying to gamble with her legacy. He was trying to pay for his mistress with her father's money. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing their initial descent into Boston. It was a short, simple flight, a decoy. She would land, walk through the terminal, exit to a waiting car, and be driven not to a charity gala, but to Logan Airport's private aviation wing. Her own jet, a faster, more advanced Bombardier Global 7500, registered to a Shell corporation in Delaware, was waiting. She would be in Geneva 6 hours before him. She would be rested, prepared, and waiting. The board, her board, was already assembled. The trap was set. All the mouse had to do was arrive for the cheese. Geneva was a portrait of crisp, old-world precision. The air off the lake was cool, and the city operated with the quiet, expensive hum of a Swiss watch. Julian's Gulfstream touched down at Geneva Airport with a smoothness that felt symbolic. He was in his element. He was a conqueror. "Ah, Genève," Chloe said, pulling off her silk sleep mask. "It's so clean. Julian, we must go to the Rue du Rhône. I need a new watch, a Patek Philippe, to celebrate. First, the deal, my love. Then we buy the entire street," Julian said, fastening his cufflinks. He felt the familiar thrill of the hunt. He had this. The elusive A.R. Vance had finally agreed to a meeting, which meant the hard part was over. The meeting was a formality, a final handshake. Vanguard needed a foothold in U.S. logistics, and he was handing it to them. A black Mercedes Maybach was waiting for them on the tarmac. As they settled into the opulent leather, Julian's phone buzzed. It was an email from Mr. Harrison, the representative for Vanguard. "Mr. Thorne, we are pleased to welcome you to Geneva. Your accommodations are confirmed at the Four Seasons Hotel de Bergue. The meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, 10:00 a.m. at our headquarters. A car will collect you at 09:30. We trust your journey was pleasant. Cordially, M. R. Harrison, Office of the Principal." "Four Seasons. Presidential suite, I hope?" Chloe asked, already texting pictures to her friends. "They're handling it," Julian said, impressed. "They're old school, professional. This is how real money moves, Chloe. Quietly." He didn't notice the discrepancy. He hadn't told Harrison where he was staying, nor had he asked them to book a room. He assumed it was a professional courtesy extended to a future partner, a sign of their eagerness. The suite was, in a word, palatial. It had soaring ceilings, priceless antiques, and a private terrace that offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of Lake Geneva and the Jet d'Eau. A bottle of Dom Pérignon Rosé was chilling in a silver bucket next to a 3-tiered platter of macarons and artisanal cheeses. "Now this is more like it," Chloe purred, dropping her fur coat on a Louis XV armchair. She ran to the terrace, throwing her arms wide. "I could get used to this. Imagine, Julian, our life. Parties here, weekends in Monaco, summers in the Hamptons. Focus, Chloe. I have to prep." Julian loosened his tie, but his eyes were on the champagne. He was already celebrating. "Oh, stop being so boring. You've basically already won," she said, popping the cork. The foam spilled over her hand. She licked it off seductively. "You're a king, Julian, and I'm going to be your queen. That poor, boring little wife of yours. What's her name?" "Amelia." "She probably thinks you're in some stuffy business hotel eating a club sandwich." Julian laughed, taking the glass from her. "She's probably picking out floral arrangements for her sister's sad little party. She has no concept of this world. Her family had money, sure, but they were academic, quiet. All that matters is that she stays in her lane." "And what's my lane?" Chloe asked, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Right here," he murmured, kissing her. "You're my reward." He spent the next few hours in a bubble of supreme confidence. He reviewed his pitch, a masterful presentation, full of bullish projections and strategic synergies. He practiced his answers to the tough questions he imagined this Vance character might ask. He felt sharp, powerful, and virile. Chloe ordered a small mountain of room service, took a bubble bath, and paraded around the suite in new lingerie she'd bought for the trip. As evening fell, they dined at Il Lago, the hotel's Michelin-starred restaurant. Julian spoke loudly about his company, his plans, his inevitable success. Chloe hung on his every word, her eyes sparkling with the reflection of his credit card's limitless potential. They were the perfect picture of new, brash, conquering money. Across the lake, in a different, more discreet wing of the same hotel, Amelia was finishing her own dinner. She was not in the presidential suite. She was in the Redwood suite, a private, unlisted residence reserved for the hotel's most powerful and anonymous guests. Guests who, like her family, had been patrons for generations. She ate a simple meal of grilled fish and vegetables, her table covered not in champagne bottles, but in legal documents. Mr. Harrison, a severe man in his late 50s with the quiet competence of a master chess player, sat opposite her. "The final audit is complete, Miss Vance," Harrison said, sliding a folder across the table. "He did it. He forged your signature on the Park Avenue mortgage agreement. He collateralized it against a bridge loan from a bank in the Cayman Islands. A bank, I might add, that we acquired 3 months ago." Amelia's expression did not change. She opened the folder and read the details. The forgery was clumsy, a desperate man's attempt to copy her flowing signature. "He's arrogant," she said, her voice a low, steady monotone. "He's always believed intelligence is measured in decibels. He thinks because I am quiet, I am stupid. He has also, against his company's bylaws, leveraged the employee pension fund to cover operational shortfalls for this quarter," Harrison added. That made her pause. "The pensions, his father's employees. He is drowning, and he is pulling everyone down with him." Amelia closed the folder. The illusion she had held of the man she married, the brilliant, driven, if sometimes ruthless man, was gone. In his place was a common criminal, a fool and a cheat. "And the other matter?" she asked, not looking up. "The guest," Harrison said, with a slight, distasteful frown. "Chloe Vance. She is with him in the presidential suite. Our staff at the front desk confirmed his check-in. He was loud." "Of course he was," Amelia said. She stood and walked to her own terrace. The view was the same as Julian's, but she saw it differently. He saw a prize. She saw a panorama of her responsibilities. "He brought her to the table," Amelia said, more to herself than to Harrison. "He brought his infidelity, his disrespect, into my world, my family's world." "How do you wish to proceed, Miss Vance?" Harrison asked. "We can have the hotel manager remove her. We can have her escorted to the airport." Amelia was silent for a long time, watching the pinpoint lights of the boats on the dark water. Julian and Chloe were probably back in their suite by now, wrapped up in their shared fantasy, laughing at the boring wife. "No," Amelia said, her voice cutting through the night air. "No, Mr. Harrison. Let her stay. Let her come with him tomorrow." Harrison looked surprised. "To the meeting?" "Miss Vance, that is highly irregular. It's a closed board meeting." "It is my board meeting," Amelia corrected him, turning around. Her eyes were like steel. "He wants to show her his new life? Fine. I want her to have a front row seat for the finale. Make security arrangements. I want her in that room. I want her to see exactly what happens when a man like Julian Thorne mistakes his wife's patience for her permission." The morning of the meeting dawned bright and unforgivingly clear. The sunlight hit the surface of Lake Geneva and shattered into 1,000,000 sharp, glittering diamonds. In the presidential suite, Julian Thorne was invincible. He had slept the deep, dreamless sleep of a man with no conscience and absolute certainty. He was already dressed in his finest bespoke suit, a navy zenja so dark it was almost black, with a bold, crimson power tie. He looked, he thought, like a man who couldn't possibly lose. He practiced his opening lines in the mirror, his voice resonating with false sincerity and boardroom charm. "Mr. Vance, gentlemen, what Thorne Dynamics represents isn't just logistics. It's the future, a streamlined, aggressive, forward-thinking paradigm." From the bedroom, Chloe emerged, yawning. She was wrapped in one of the hotel's plush bathrobes, her hair a mess. "Julian, are you still talking to yourself? You're going to be late, and my stomach is rumbling. This is the most important presentation of my life, Chloe. It has to be perfect." "It will be perfect," she said, coming up behind him and massaging his shoulders. "You're perfect. Now, I've been thinking." "Oh," he said, distracted, adjusting a cufflink. "I'm coming with you." Julian froze. He turned to look at her. "What? Don't be ridiculous. This is a closed-door meeting with a $1 trillion investment firm. You can't just—" "Come along." Her face immediately crumpled, the pout emerging. "Why not? You said I was your partner. You said this was the start of our new life. How can it be our life if I'm hiding up in a hotel room like some mistress?" The word hung in the air. "You're not," Julian said quickly, the denial reflexive. "You are. You're my future. But this is business, Chloe. They're old-world Europeans. It's not appropriate." "I think it's very appropriate," she argued, her voice hardening. "I want to see you in action. I want to meet this Mr. Vance. I want him to see the woman who's going to be by your side. It shows strength. It shows you're a modern man, not hiding behind some dowdy wife." Julian hesitated. A part of him, the rational part, screamed that this was a colossally bad idea. But another, larger part, his ego, was intrigued. He imagined walking in not just as a CEO, but as a man who had it all, the money, the power, and the stunning young woman on his arm. It was a projection of total victory. What better way to show this ghost Vance that he was a man of decision and vitality? "You'd have to be silent," he said, the idea taking root. "You'd be an observer, my executive consultant." Chloe's face lit up. "Of course. I'll be brilliant. I'll just sit there and look supportive. Now, what do I wear?" An hour later, they descended to the lobby. Chloe had chosen a vibrant, tight-fitting red dress that was more appropriate for a cocktail party than a 10 a.m. financial meeting. But Julian, blinded by his own arrogance, simply thought she looked spectacular. The Maybach was waiting. "Vanguard headquarters," Julian said to the driver, his voice booming with confidence. "Yes, Mr. Thorne, I know the way." As they pulled into the sleek, modern glass and steel building that served as Vanguard's anonymous European hub, Julian felt a final, glorious surge of adrenaline. This was it. The rest of his life was beginning. At that exact moment, 2 floors above them, Amelia was standing at the head of a long, imposing boardroom table. The room was vast, with one wall of glass overlooking the city and the lake. The other 3 walls were dark, polished mahogany. At the table sat her board, Mr. Harrison, 2 sharp-eyed lawyers, one from Zurich, one from New York, and her chief financial officer. They were all silent, their folders open. Amelia was unrecognizable as the Mrs. Thorne of Park Avenue. She wore a severe, custom-made suit of charcoal grey wool. Her hair was pulled back into a tight, intricate chignon. Her only jewellery was her father's watch and a pair of discreet diamond studs. She looked less like a wife and more like a general preparing for battle. "Security confirms they are in the elevator." "Both of them," Harrison said quietly, checking his tablet. "Good," Amelia said. Her voice was ice. "Miss Vance," the New York lawyer, a man named Bennett, interjected. "Are you absolutely certain about this? Theatrics are unpredictable. We can simply let Mr. Harrison handle the negation. Your presence isn't strictly required for the asset seizure." Amelia looked down the long, empty table. She thought of the forged signature. She thought of the pension funds. She thought of the endless, quiet humiliations, the condescension, the years of being treated like a decorative, brainless object. "Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice so cold it seemed to lower the temperature in the room. "When a surgeon has to remove a cancer, he does not send his assistant to do it. He cuts it out himself, with precision." She walked to the window, her back to the room, and looked down at the city. He wants to meet A.R. Vance. He wants the power and the money. Well, today he gets his wish. He is going to see exactly who he married, and exactly who he tried to rob. She heard the faint ding of the private elevator arriving in the reception area outside. "Take your seats, gentlemen," Amelia said, turning from the window. She walked to the high-backed leather chair at the head of the table and sat down. Her hands were perfectly steady. She didn't fidget. She didn't check her reflection. She simply waited. The double doors to the boardroom were closed. On the other side, Julian was adjusting his tie one last time. "Ready, darling?" Chloe whispered, clutching his arm. "Born ready," Julian said. A receptionist opened the door. "Mr. Thorne, the board will see you now." Julian put a hand on Chloe's back, smiled his most charming smile, and propelled them both into the room. The first thing that hit Julian was the silence. It was not the expectant hush of a welcoming committee. It was the cold, sterile silence of an operating theatre. The room was long, dark, and dominated by the massive mahogany table. At the far end, silhouetted against the blindingly bright window, sat a figure. Several other figures, all men in dark suits, flanked the table. "Mr. Vance, I presume?" Julian began, striding forward with his hand outstretched, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "Julian Thorne, it is an absolute honor to finally—" He stopped. He was halfway down the table, his hand still in the air, his smile frozen. Chloe, a step behind him, bumped into his back, her high heels clacking on the marble floor. "Oof, Julian, what?" The figure at the head of the table leaned forward slightly, moving out of the direct glare of the window. It was Amelia. Julian's brain simply refused to process the image. It was a system error, a blue screen of the mind. This was impossible. This was a hallucination. Amelia was in Boston. She was at a charity gala. She was Amelia. She was not here, in this suit, at the head of this table, staring at him with eyes he had never seen before, eyes as flat and cold as glacial ice. "Amelia?" The name came out as a strangled whisper. What are you doing here? How did you— Is this a joke?" Chloe, peering around his shoulder, let out a confused, nervous laugh. "Amelia? Oh my God, Julian, is this your wife? What is she like, the secretary? Honey, can you get us some coffee? 2, please. Black for him. Extra sweet latte for me." No one moved. No one spoke. The men at the table, Harrison, Bennett, the others, looked at Chloe as if she were a piece of lint, then immediately dismissed her. Their focus was entirely on the 2 people at the ends of the table. Amelia looked past Julian, her gaze landing on Chloe for one dismissive second. She did not acknowledge the coffee order. She did not acknowledge Chloe's presence. Instead, she looked directly at her husband. "Mr. Thorne," she said, and the voice that came out was not the voice of his wife. It was a crisp, clear, boardroom contralto, amplified slightly by the room's acoustics. It was a voice of absolute, unquestioned authority. "Please take a seat. You too, Miss Vance. I believe you requested to be here." The use of her name hit Chloe like a slap. "How do you know my name?" Julian, his face draining of all color, finally found his legs. He stumbled into the chair opposite Harrison. "Amelia, explain this. Now." "Explanation?" Amelia raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I believe you are the one here to present a proposal, Mr. Thorne. You requested a meeting with Vanguard Equity Partners. You are now at that meeting." "But you're—" Julian's mind was still catching up. He looked at the plaque on the table in front of her. It was small, discreet, and made of brushed steel. It read, A.R. Vance, Principal. His blood ran cold. A.R. Vance, Amelia, Redwood, Vance. He said the name, his own wife's full maiden name, as if for the first time, the name he had never bothered to connect to the investment firm he was chasing. "Oh, Julian," Chloe said, her voice now high and brittle. "Is this some kind of setup? Did your wife follow you?" "Silence," Mr. Harrison said, his voice quiet but absolute. "This is a board meeting." "Julian, this is absurd," Amelia continued, ignoring the interruption. "You came all this way. You brought your consultant. Please begin your presentation. We are all very eager to hear about the streamlined, aggressive, forward-thinking paradigm you're proposing." She had quoted his words from the mirror. He realized with dawning, sickening horror that the suite was bugged. The hotel, the car, they had been listening. Julian's face, which had been pale, now flushed a dark, mottled red. The shock was turning to rage. This was a humiliation, a setup. "You did this," he hissed. "You set me up. This entire thing, the meeting, the Vance mystery. It was you. All you." "I did nothing, Julian," Amelia said calmly. "You are the CEO of Thorn Dynamics. You are the one who ran it into the ground. You are the one who chased my firm for a bailout. And you are the one who chose to bring your intern to the meeting. I simply arranged the seating." You bitch!" Julian spat, rising from his chair. "Sit down, Mr. Thorn," Mr. Bennett, the lawyer, snapped, "or security will assist you." Two large, uniformed security guards, previously unnoticed, materialized from a recess near the door. Julian, shaking, slowly sat. He looked at the men at the table. They were not looking at him with pity or even anger. They were looking at him with contempt. "Now," Amelia said, opening the sleek folder in front of her. "Let's dispense with your presentation. We've already read it. And frankly, the fiction section at the airport bookshop is more believable." She pressed a button on the console in front of her. The large wall behind her, which had looked like dark wood, lit up. It was a massive digital display. On it was a single document, the balance sheet for Thorn Dynamics, the real one. "This," Amelia said, "is your company, not the fantasy you've been shopping around. Let's start with the $80 million operational shortfall you've been hiding by leveraging your employee pension fund. An act, I might add, which is highly illegal." Julian's breath hitched. He had buried that. No one could have known. "Or," Amelia continued, swiping to the next slide, "we could discuss the series of bridge loans you've taken out, specifically this one, from a small boutique bank in the Cayman Islands." The next slide showed a document, a mortgage agreement. "That," Amelia said, "is the deed to our Park Avenue apartment, an asset which I own 50% of outright as per our prenuptial agreement, an asset you leveraged without my knowledge." She zoomed in. The signature Amelia R. Thorn was visible. It was a shaky, unconvincing scrawl. "And that," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "is a felony, Julian. A very, very clumsy forgery." The room was utterly silent. Julian was no longer breathing. He was just existing. A statue of a man, his arrogance and confidence shattered into dust. It was Chloe who finally broke the silence. A prenup," she whispered, her eyes wide with terror, staring at Julian. "You told me there was no prenup. You told me her family money was all tied up in trusts. You said half of everything was yours." Julian couldn't speak. Amelia looked at the horrified young woman. For the first time, a flicker of something, not pity, but perhaps weary understanding, crossed her face. "He lied, Ms. Vance," Amelia said simply. "He lies about everything. That is his nature. Now let's move on to the terms of my decision." Julian stared at the screen, at the digital copy of his forged signature, at the red-flagged numbers of the pension fund. The complex, invincible fortress of his life, built on charm and risk and deceit, had just been leveled by a single, quiet detonation. And the demolitions expert was his wife. "Amelia, please," he managed, his voice hoarse. The rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, pathetic pleading. "Listen to me. We can fix this. It's just creative accounting. Every big company does it. I was trying to protect us, to protect you." Amelia actually laughed. It was not a sound Julian had ever heard from her. It was short, sharp, and utterly devoid of humor. "Protect me?" she repeated, disbelief coloring her icy tone. "You were protecting me when you leveraged my home? Were you protecting me when you stole from your employees, the people who trusted your father for 30 years? Or," and here her eyes flickered to Chloe, who looked as if she were about to be physically sick, "were you protecting me when you booked this trip, using company funds to fly your mistress to Geneva in a G550? The color drained from Chloe's face. "Company funds? You said it was your jet." "Julian doesn't own a jet, Ms. Vance," Mr. Harrison interjected, his voice dripping with disdain. "He charters it, and he's 3 months behind on his payments to NetJets. We know. We bought the debt." This new piece of information hit Julian like another physical blow. You bought my debt?" "We own all of your debt, Julian," Amelia said, standing up. She began to pace slowly in front of the window, a predator outlining the borders of her cage. "For the last 6 months, while you've been distracted, Vanguard has been quietly acquiring every piece of Thorn Dynamics' outstanding debt. The loan from the Caymans? That was us. The bonds you issued last quarter? Us. The lease on your corporate headquarters in Manhattan? We are your new landlord. You haven't been trying to get a meeting with a new investor, Julian. You've been unknowingly corresponding with your single largest creditor." Julian's world tilted. He wasn't here for a lifeline. He had been summoned for an execution. You can't," he stammered. "Why? Why would you do this? We're married." "Yes," Amelia said, stopping directly in front of him. She leaned down, placing her hands flat on the gleaming table. She was close enough that he could smell her perfume. It wasn't the light, floral scent she wore at home. This was something dark, expensive, and smoky. "We are married, and as your wife, I had a front row seat. I watched you become this hollow man, arrogant, dismissive, and sloppy. You thought I was a fool, Julian, a decoration. You thought I was just Amelia, the woman who hosts charities and picks out furniture." She turned and addressed the room. "But my father, Arthur Redwood Vance, did not raise a fool. He raised his successor. When he died, he left me in control of this firm. A firm you saw as a target, never once connecting it to the woman sleeping in your bed." She walked back to her chair. "So no, Mr. Thorne, Vanguard will not be investing $300 million to save your company. We will be calling in the $500 million in debt you already owe us, effective immediately." "No!" Julian shouted, leaping to his feet again. "You can't! That will bankrupt me. It will trigger every other clause. I'll be ruined." "You are already ruined, Julian," Amelia said flatly. "You did this to yourself." "But what about you?" he cried, grasping at straws. "Our assets, the prenup. Even with the prenup, you'll lose. The press. It will be a scandal." "Ah, the prenup," Mr. Bennett, the lawyer, said, finally speaking up. He slid a thick, leather-bound document across the table. "I have it right here. I drafted it myself, 12 years ago, at Mr. Redwood Vance's request. It's quite ironclad. It protects all of Ms. Vance's assets, all of Vanguard, and all inherited properties. But you are correct, Mr. Thorne. Your shared assets would normally be split. Julian nodded, a wild, desperate hope in his eyes. Yes, see? The apartment. The art. However, Bennett continued, if you'd kindly turn to page 14, section 8b, the infidelity clause. Julian's blood turned to ice. An infidelity clause? Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. You signed an infidelity clause? It's very specific, Bennett said, clearly enjoying himself. It states that in the event of proven marital infidelity on Mr. Thorne's part, he forfeits any and all claim to shared assets, including but not limited to real estate, art, and liquid accounts. All claims revert to Miss Vance. Proven? Julian spat. You can't prove anything. Amelia sighed. Julian, please don't make this any more pathetic than it already is. Mr. Harrison. Harrison tapped a key. The main screen lit up again. This time it wasn't spreadsheets. It was a photograph. Julian and Chloe kissing outside a restaurant in Soho. Date stamped. The next slide, Julian and Chloe entering a hotel. The next, a clear shot of them on the tarmac at Teterboro, just yesterday. The next, a still from the security camera inside the elevator of the Four Seasons, showing them in a passionate embrace. Chloe let out a small, strangled sob and covered her mouth. And that, Amelia said, as the screen went black, is before we even get to the forgery, the pension fraud, and the embezzlement of company funds to pay for this. She gestured vaguely at Chloe. You are not just facing a divorce, Julian. You are facing the SEC, the Department of Labor, and the District Attorney of New York. You're not just losing your company. You're losing your freedom. Julian Thorne collapsed into his chair. It wasn't a slow sinking. It was a gravitational failure. The strings holding him up had been cut. He stared at the polished table, his reflection staring back, a broken, terrified, middle-aged man. He was finished, utterly and completely. Now, Amelia said, her voice brisk, Mr. Harrison will present you with two options. Option A, you sign these documents, transferring your remaining shares in Thorne Dynamics and your signatory power over to us immediately. You also sign these divorce papers, which cite irreconcilable differences, and you agree to the terms of the prenup. You walk out of here with nothing, literally nothing. But if you do that, Vanguard may choose to restructure the pension fund and make your employees whole, and we may choose to handle the forgery and embezzlement as an internal matter. And option B, Julian whispered, his lips barely moving. Option B, Amelia said, standing up. You refuse, and I call the police. Right now. The choice is yours. You have 5 minutes. Amelia walked to the door, followed by her CFO. She paused, her hand on the handle. Oh, and Julian. He looked up, his eyes vacant and dead. The presidential suite was booked on my account, as was your jet. Your credit cards were all frozen an hour ago. So, however this ends, you'll need to find your own way home. She swept out of the room, leaving him alone with the lawyers, the security guards, and the weeping girl in the red dress. The heavy boardroom door clicked shut, and the silence that descended was heavier and more suffocating than before. Julian sat, unmoving, staring at the stack of documents Mr. Harrison had pushed in front of him. It was his entire life, condensed into 100 pages of surrender. Chloe was the first to move. Her sobs, which had been hysterical, sharpened into a shrill, panicked anger. You! She shrieked, standing up and pointing a trembling finger at Julian. You idiot! You ruined me! You told me you were powerful! You told me you were rich! You swore to me you were leaving her! That I was going to be the new Mrs. Thorne! Julian didn't even look at her. He was a hollowed-out shell. An infidelity clause? Pension fraud? Chloe was backing away toward the door, her eyes wide with the realization that she was tied to a sinking ship. No, a submarine that had already imploded. "You're a criminal. You lied to me. I'm a witness." "Miss Vance," Mr. Bennet said, his voice bored, "you are free to go. I'd advise you to find your own legal counsel, and as your credit cards are secondary to Mr. Thorne's accounts, I'd imagine they are also no longer functional." That hit her. My cards? I can't. How am I supposed to get back to New York?" "That is not our concern," Harrison said, tapping his pen. "Mr. Thorne, the clock is ticking." Chloe looked at Julian, her face a mask of pure, undiluted hatred. "I hate you, Julian Thorne. You're pathetic." She grabbed her purse, yanked open the boardroom door, and ran out, her heels echoing down the marble hallway. She was gone. The reward, the future, the queen, evaporated at the first sign of actual trouble. Now, it was just Julian. He was alone with the men who were here to dismantle him. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking so violently he could barely hold it. He thought of his father, the man who had built Thorne Dynamics from a single truck. He thought of the arrogance with which he had dismissed Amelia for 12 years, the sheer, blinding hubris. He had seen her as a soft, passive, background element to his dynamic life. He never realized he was just a noisy, temporary character in her story. She hadn't just checkmated him. She had revealed he was playing checkers while she was playing three-dimensional chess, a game she had already won before he even sat down. He signed the first page. The divorce settlement. He signed the next. The transfer of shares. He signed the next. The forfeiture of assets. Each signature felt like a pint of blood leaving his body. When he was done, he pushed the stack back. He was nothing. A man with a designer suit he no longer owned, and a watch he would have to sell. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Thorne," Harrison said, professionally gathering the documents. "A car is waiting downstairs to take you to the airport. It will take you to the commercial terminal. We've booked you a one-way ticket, economy class, on Swiss Air, connecting through JFK. It leaves in 3 hours. Do not miss it." Julian stood up. His legs felt like lead. The security guards moved toward him. "I can walk," he muttered. He walked out of the boardroom. He didn't look back. The receptionist in the lobby didn't look up from her screen. He rode the elevator down, the mirrored walls showing him a stranger, a pale, defeated, terrified man. The illusion was gone, and the reality was unbearable. He stepped out of the sleek glass building into the bright Geneva sunlight. It felt like an assault. The waiting car was not a Maybach. It was a simple, dark sedan. He got in the back. As the car pulled away, he looked back at the Vanguard building, a monument to the power he had tried to swindle and lost. Upstairs in the Redwood suite, Amelia stood on her private terrace, a cup of tea in her hands. She watched the small sedan pull into traffic and disappear. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel joy. She felt a profound, hollowing relief. The cancer had been excised. It was over. Mr. Harrison entered the suite. "It is done, Miss Vance. He signed everything. The assets are secure. The SEC notification will be filed by our legal team within the hour, framing it as an internal restructuring and ousting of corrupt management. We will make the pension fund whole by tomorrow. The Thorne Dynamics brand is dead. We will rebrand the viable assets as Vanguard Logistics. And Mr. Thorne? He is on his way to the commercial airport. He will land in New York with nothing but the clothes on his back." "Good," Amelia said. She took a sip of her tea. "And Miss Vance?" Harrison permitted himself a small, dry smile. She was last seen at the concierge desk, attempting to sell her watch. Apparently, Patek Philippe has a strict no-buyback policy. She was irate. Amelia nodded, a small, messy loose end. Have our security team escort her to the airport as well. Buy her a one-way ticket to New York, in coach. See that she gets on the plane. Then she's no longer our concern. Very good, Miss Vance. Harrison paused. And you? Amelia looked out at the jet d'eau, a powerful, defiant plume of water shooting into the sky. She felt like that water. For 12 years she had been held down, compressed, and contained. Now she was free. The Amelia Thorne identity was gone, dissolved along with her sham of a marriage. I am going to stay in Geneva for the week, said Amelia Redwood Vance. I have a company to run. The story of Julian Thorne is a brutal reminder that the most dangerous person is the one you underestimate. He saw his wife as a quiet accessory to his life, not as the architect of his downfall. He built his empire on ego and deceit, forgetting that true power, real power, doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to show off in a flashy jet or a red dress. Real power is patient, it's intelligent, and it waits for the perfect moment to strike. Julian lost everything, not because he was caught, but because he was arrogant enough to believe he was the smartest person in the room, never realizing he wasn't even on the guest list. What do you think? Was Amelia's revenge justified, or was it a cold, calculated destruction? Could Julian ever have been redeemed, or was he a victim of his own incurable arrogance? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. This story was a wild one, and if you enjoyed this journey into drama and sweet, sweet revenge, please show your support. Hit that like button. Share this video with a friend who loves a good story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more tales of secrets, lies, and the powerful truths that always come to light. Thank you for listening. He stood in the center of New York's most exclusive restaurant, a symbol of power and success, holding a diamond ring that glittered with the fire of 1,000 captured stars. He was about to place it on the finger of his mistress, a public declaration of his new life, his new love. The crowd was captivated, their phones recording the audacious spectacle. But what he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that the woman who had just walked in, the wife he had so casually discarded, wasn't just there to witness her humiliation. She was there to collect her property, because she didn't just own the ring, she owned the entire multi-billion-dollar brand that created it. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's the story of a queen taking back her kingdom, one carat at a time. The low hum of contented wealth filled the cavernous space of La Lanterne d'Or. Crystal glasses chimed with the sound of celebratory toasts, and the murmur of discreet conversation wove itself into the soft melodies drifting from a grand piano tucked away in a velvet-draped alcove. This was Jonathan Davenport's natural habitat. He thrived in these environments, places where a man's worth could be measured by the cut of his suit, the vintage of his wine, and the beauty of the woman on his arm. Tonight, he was a king surveying his court, and the woman on his arm was Penelope Vance. Penelope was a masterpiece of modern ambition. Her blonde hair was styled into an impossibly sleek cascade that fell over the bare skin of her back, exposed by a shimmering emerald gown that clung to her every curve. She was 28, 2 decades younger than Jonathan, and she looked at him with an intoxicating blend of awe and adoration that he had long ceased to see in his wife's eyes. He sipped his Chateau Margaux, the dark liquid a perfect complement to the smug satisfaction warming his chest. "Are you nervous, darling?" Penelope whispered, her fingers tracing the lapel of his Tom Ford suit. Jonathan chuckled, a deep, confident sound. Nervous? Penelope, I've orchestrated multi-billion-dollar mergers. This is a pleasure. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. This is for us. A public statement. No more hiding in the shadows. The world needs to see who the real man of the hour is, and who his leading lady will be. Her eyes, the color of a summer sky, widened with a carefully practiced innocence. Oh, Jonathan, you're too much. But she didn't mean it. She loved that he was too much. His extravagance was her validation. Every expensive gift, every exclusive reservation, was another brick in the foundation of the life she was meticulously building for herself, a life far removed from her middle-class upbringing in Ohio. Across town, in a brightly lit studio in the meatpacking district that smelled of metal polish and focused creativity, Catherine Reyes was oblivious to the drama about to unfold. Her dark hair was pulled back into a simple, elegant knot, and a pair of artisan's goggles were pushed up onto her forehead. Her hands, graceful but strong, moved with a familiar certainty over a wax model of a new earring design. This was her sanctuary, the heart of Reyes Jewels, the company her father, the legendary Hector Reyes, had founded, and she had built into a global empire. Reyes Jewels wasn't just another luxury brand, it was an institution. Each piece told a story, infused with a soul that mass-produced jewelry could never replicate. Catherine was the keeper of that soul, while Jonathan, her husband of 19 years, handled the aggressive business strategies and public relations as CEO. She was the architect, the artist, the very essence of the brand. Her phone buzzed on the workbench, and she glanced at the screen. Samantha Jones, her head of operations and closest friend. She swiped to answer, placing it on speaker. Burning the midnight oil again, Cat. Sam's voice was warm but laced with its usual no-nonsense tone. Just refining the Persephone collection. The clasp on the locket isn't right. It feels weak, Catherine replied, her eyes not leaving the delicate piece in her hands. You're the only person on earth who would lose sleep over the tensile strength of a locket clasp, Sam said with a laugh. There was a pause. Hey, speaking of things that aren't right, I was going over the quarterly expense reports for the executive accounts. Catherine sighed, finally setting the model down. Sam, please tell me this isn't another lecture about Jonathan's entertainment budget. I wish it were that simple. It's not the dinners at Oriole or the fleet of town cars. There's a charge here from our own flagship store, a significant one. It was coded as a promotional acquisition, but it was processed through his private executive account. A single item. A knot of unease tightened in Catherine's stomach. She had been feeling it for months, a persistent, low-grade dread she tried to push away. The late nights Jonathan attributed to investor calls, the faint, unfamiliar scent of perfume on his clothes, the emotional chasm that had opened between them, vast and silent. She had chosen to believe his excuses, to immerse herself in her work because the alternative was too painful to contemplate. How significant? Catherine asked, her voice quiet. Star of Serenity significant, Sam replied, naming one of their most exclusive high-carat bespoke pieces, a flawless 15-carat blue diamond set in a platinum band intricately woven with smaller, brilliant-cut stones. It was a masterpiece of design and rarity. Catherine's breath caught in her throat. She knew that piece intimately. She had overseen its creation from the initial sketch to the final polish. That piece was commissioned for the vault. It's not for sale. Well, apparently it is now. Or it was. Jonathan authorized the transfer himself 3 days ago. The paperwork is all here, signed and sealed, Sam said, the concern in her voice deepening. Kat, what's going on?" Catherine sank onto her stool, the scent of metal polish suddenly cloying, the weak clasp, the late nights, the emotional distance, and now this, a secret, extravagant purchase of one of her own creations. The pieces of the puzzle were clicking into place, forming a picture she didn't want to see. "He told me he had a big charity gala tonight," Catherine said, her voice barely a whisper. "At La Lanterne d'Or." A heavy silence hung between them. Sam didn't need to say anything more. They both knew. The charity wasn't a cause, it was a woman. The gala wasn't an event, it was a stage. Back at the restaurant, Jonathan signaled the waiter. The moment had arrived. The lights in the dining room dimmed slightly, a prearranged cue. A hush fell over the tables as diners sensed a spectacle was imminent. Penelope's heart hammered against her ribs. "Penelope," Jonathan began, his voice resonating with theatrical gravity. "For too long, I have been living a life of obligation, a life in black and white. You brought the color back. You have shown me what true passion, true partnership can be." He reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved a small velvet box. It was a deep navy blue, the signature color of Rhea's jewels. Penelope gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. This was it, the culmination of all her efforts, the ultimate prize. Jonathan's eyes gleamed with triumph as he opened the box. Nestled inside, the Star of Serenity diamond drank the light of the room and threw it back in a dazzling, fiery explosion of blue and white brilliance. It was more magnificent than she could have ever imagined. With the entire restaurant watching, with dozens of phones held aloft recording his every move, Jonathan Davenport slid off his chair and knelt on one knee before his mistress. "Penelope Vance," he declared, his voice booming in the quiet room, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" 19 years ago, Jonathan Davenport had been different. Or maybe, Catherine often thought, he had been the same man. But she had been a different woman, one who saw him through a filter of youthful optimism and shared dreams. They had met at a gallery opening in Soho. He was a junior investment banker then, sharp and ambitious, with a smile that could disarm a hostile boardroom. She was the quiet, intense daughter of the great Hector Reyes, more comfortable at a jeweler's bench than at a cocktail party. He had been fascinated by her world. He didn't just see the sparkle of the finished gems, he saw the fire, the pressure, the meticulous art that transformed a rough stone into a thing of beauty. He would sit for hours in her father's workshop, asking intelligent questions, his eyes alight with genuine curiosity. He hadn't just courted her. He had courted her craft. He saw the potential in Rhea's jewels long before she did. "Your father is a master artist, Kat," he'd told her one evening, his hand covering hers over a table cluttered with sketches. "But this is more than a workshop. It's a legacy. It's a brand. It could be the biggest name in haute joaillerie, bigger than Cartier, bigger than Van Cleef and Arpels." She had been swept away by his vision, his energy. Her father was a purist, content with his bespoke clientele and his sterling reputation. Jonathan saw a global empire. When they married, he brought his business acumen to her artistic heritage. At first, it was a perfect partnership. After Hector Reyes passed away from a sudden heart attack 5 years into their marriage, Catherine was devastated, lost in a sea of grief. Jonathan stepped in, a pillar of strength. He took the reins of the business side, assuming the title of CEO, allowing her to grieve and to focus on what she did best: design. "You are the soul of this company, my love," he had assured her. "Let me be the shield. I'll handle the boring stuff, the supply chains, the marketing budgets, the expansion plans. You just create. Create the beauty only you can, And so she had. Under their dual leadership, Reyes Jewels exploded. They opened flagships in Paris, London, and Tokyo. Their pieces adorned royalty and Hollywood A-listers. Jonathan became a celebrated figure in the business world, lauded for his Midas touch, his aggressive and brilliant strategies that had turned a respected family business into a billion-dollar powerhouse. But slowly, subtly, the narrative began to shift. In interviews, our vision became my strategy. Catherine's design became the product my creative team developed. He was the face of the company, the charismatic rainmaker. She, by her own preference for privacy, became the reclusive genius, the name on the box who was rarely seen. The emotional distance between them grew in direct proportion to the company's stock price. The man who once sat mesmerized in her workshop now barely glanced at her sketches. His late nights, once spent with her poring over designs, were now spent at business dinners she was never invited to. The shared passion that had been the bedrock of their relationship was gone, replaced by a polite, professional courtesy. They were partners in business, but strangers in life. Their sprawling penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, once a warm home filled with laughter and collaborative energy, had become a gilded cage. It was a showroom for their success, impeccably decorated, yet cold and silent. Catherine found her solace not there, but in the controlled, creative chaos of her private studio. Her work was the one thing that was still truly hers, a direct connection to her father and to the woman she used to be. The rhythmic scrape of a file against metal, the precise click of a setting tool. These were the sounds of her real life. She had tried to ignore the warning signs, burying her hurt and loneliness in the intricate details of a new collection. When a friend had mentioned seeing Jonathan laughing intimately with a young blonde at a polo match in the Hamptons, Catherine had dismissed it as a business meeting. When she found a receipt for a lavish dinner for two at a restaurant she'd never been to, she'd accepted his flimsy excuse about entertaining a client. To acknowledge the truth would be to admit that the entire edifice of her life was a lie. It was easier to believe in the illusion than to face the shattering reality. But the purchase of the Star of Serenity was different. It wasn't just an extravagant expense. It was a violation. That diamond was more than just a stone. It was a symbol, a piece of her family's history. Her father had acquired the raw 50-carat diamond years ago, calling it his someday stone. He believed a gem of that magnitude and unique color had to wait for the perfect design, the perfect moment. After he died, the stone sat in the master vault, a silent, blue-flamed tribute to his legacy. 2 years ago, for their anniversary, Catherine had finally felt ready to honor it. She had designed the Star of Serenity, setting herself, a deeply personal project. The intricate platinum weave was meant to represent their two lives intertwining, the smaller, brilliant-cut diamonds, the highlights of their journey together. It was a testament, she had believed, to a love that, though strained, was enduring. She had shown the designs to Jonathan, and he had been uncharacteristically moved. "It's magnificent, Cat." "Truly," he had said, his voice thick with an emotion she now realized was entirely fraudulent. "Let's keep it safe, for a special occasion. For us." Now, he was taking that symbol of us and using it as a prop in a tawdry public spectacle. He wasn't just cheating on her. He was desecrating her father's memory and perverting her own art. He was using the very soul of her life's work to destroy her. The hurt was a physical thing, a white-hot blade twisting in her gut. But as she sat there in the silence of her studio, the pain began to cool, solidifying into something else. It was no longer the fragile grief of a betrayed wife. It was the cold, hard fury of a queen whose castle was under siege. She stood up, her movements calm and deliberate. She walked over to a full-length mirror and looked at her reflection. She saw the smudge of graphite on her cheek and the fatigue in her eyes. This was not the image of a victim. This was the creator, the architect, the true owner of the Reyes legacy. Jonathan had made a fatal miscalculation. He had mistaken her quiet nature for weakness. He had forgotten that the same hands that could shape delicate filigree could also crush stone. "Sam," she said, her voice devoid of its earlier tremor, now imbued with an icy resolve. "Get the car. We're going to a gala." "What are you going to do?" Sam asked, a hint of awe in her voice. "He wants to make a public statement," Catherine replied, pulling the goggles from her hair and letting it fall around her shoulders. "I'm going to give him one." La Lanterne d'Or was not merely a restaurant, it was a theatre, and its proprietor, Pierre, was a master of stagecraft. The lighting was an intimate, honeyed gold. The tables were spaced far enough apart for secrets to be whispered, but close enough for grand gestures to be witnessed by all. Tonight, the main performance was at Table 12, center stage. The occasion was the annual Gems of the City fundraiser, a black tie event benefiting youth arts programs, a cause Jonathan Davenport championed with loud, public donations that bought him priceless social capital. It was the perfect backdrop for his personal drama. Penelope felt like she was floating. The champagne, the admiring glances from other tables, the weight of Jonathan's hand on the small of her back. It was all intoxicating. She saw her reflection in the polished surface of a silver wine chiller and smiled. This was the woman she was meant to be. Confident, desired, dripping in luxury. The woman who had won. She knew Jonathan was married. He had painted a bleak picture of a cold, passionless relationship with a woman who was, in his words, married to her work. He had described Catherine as a recluse, a fragile artist who had retreated from the world after her father's death, leaving him to run their empire alone. Penelope felt a flicker of pity for the poor woman, but it was quickly extinguished by her own soaring ambition. Jonathan tapped his glass with a fork, and the gentle chime silenced the room. He rose, a broad, confident smile on his face. The diners, a mix of New York's financial elite and old-money philanthropists, turned their attention to him. He was a popular figure, known for his charm and his company's spectacular success. "Friends, colleagues," he began, his voice smooth and commanding. "Thank you all for being here tonight to support such a worthy cause. We are here to celebrate art, to nurture the creative spark in the next generation. And in that spirit, I find myself moved to celebrate a more personal work of art." He turned his gaze to Penelope, and her breath hitched. This was more than she had expected. "For a long time," he continued, his voice taking on a confessional tone, "my life was governed by duty, by legacy. I helped build an empire of beautiful things, but my own world felt hollow. And then I met someone who is herself a masterpiece. Someone who reminded me that the most precious gems are not the ones we pull from the earth, but the ones we are lucky enough to find in people. Passion, vitality, and a love for life." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. This was far more personal than the usual corporate benefactor speech. Across the room, the venerable Mr. Bartholomew, a titan of the luxury goods industry and an old friend of Catherine's father, watched with a deeply furrowed brow, his expression unreadable. Jonathan's hand dipped into his pocket. "And so tonight, as we celebrate new beginnings for the young artists of our city, I want to mark a new beginning for myself." He produced the navy velvet box. A collective gasp went through the room. Penelope felt a dizzying rush of triumph. He was doing it here, in front of everyone. It was a power move, a definitive severing of his past, and a bold claiming of his future with her. He opened the box. The star of serenity ignited under the soft lights. Its blue fire was hypnotic, otherworldly. It was the most beautiful thing Penelope had ever seen. The sheer size and brilliance of it sent another shockwave through the audience. This was not just a ring. It was a statement of unimaginable wealth and intent. This was a queen's ransom. With practiced grace, Jonathan lowered himself to one knee. The flashes of camera phones, previously discreet, now became a strobe-lit frenzy. The moment was being captured, broadcast, immortalized. "Penelope Vance," he proclaimed, his voice ringing with the sincerity of a seasoned performer. "You have shown me what it means to truly live. Will you make me the happiest man in the world? Will you be my wife?" Tears welled in Penelope's eyes, tears of genuine, overwhelming joy. This was her coronation. She opened her mouth to say the single word that would seal her destiny, the word she had been dreaming of for months. "Yes," she began to breathe out, a soft, eager sound. But the word was swallowed by another voice. A voice that was not loud, but carried with such clarity and authority that it sliced through the captivated silence of the room like a shard of diamond. "That's a beautiful piece, Jonathan. I'm glad you appreciate my work." Every head in the restaurant turned towards the grand entrance. Standing there, framed by the ornate archway, was Catherine Reyes. She was not what the room expected. Jonathan's descriptions had painted a picture of a mousy, withdrawn woman, a ghost haunting a workshop. The woman who stood before them was anything but. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored black dress that fell to her ankles. It was unadorned, save for a single, breathtaking piece of jewelry, a necklace of her own design, a cascade of white diamonds and sapphires that coiled around her neck like a celestial serpent. Her dark hair was styled in a sleek chignon, and her face, though pale, was a mask of serene composure. She did not look angry or hysterical. She looked like she owned the room. In truth, she owned the very brand that was at the center of the spectacle. Behind her, a step to her left, stood Samantha Jones. In a sharp pantsuit, with a tablet clutched in one hand and an expression of grim satisfaction on her face, Sam looked less like a guest and more like an executioner's aide. Jonathan froze, still on one knee, the ring held aloft. The blood drained from his face, replaced by a mottled, purplish hue of pure shock. It was as if he was seeing an apparition. This was impossible. Catherine never came to these events. She hated the schmoozing, the flash bulbs, the superficiality of it all. She was supposed to be in her studio, safely out of sight, oblivious. Penelope stared, her mind struggling to process the scene. Who was this woman? Her poise, her elegance, the way the entire room's energy had shifted to orbit around her. It sent a prickle of fear up Penelope's spine. She glanced at Jonathan's horrified face, and a sliver of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced her triumphant haze. Catherine's eyes, a deep, intelligent brown, swept the room once, acknowledging the audience, before settling on the tableau at table 12. She began to walk forward, her heels clicking with a soft, rhythmic cadence on the marble floor. It was not the hurried, frantic pace of a woman wronged. It was the deliberate, unhurried stride of a predator approaching its cornered prey. The whispers started, low and urgent. That's Catherine Reyes. Hector Reyes's daughter. Jonathan's wife." The last word hung in the air, charged and damning. Catherine reached the table. She didn't look at Jonathan. Her gaze fell upon the ring glittering in the box, and then lifted to meet Penelope's confused and fearful eyes. Catherine's expression was not one of anger, but of something far more unnerving, a clinical, almost pitiful assessment. "He didn't tell you, did he?" Catherine's voice was calm, conversational, yet it carried an edge of steel. "About who I am, or about that ring?" Penelope could only shake her head, her fairy tale moment crumbling into a nightmare. Jonathan scrambled to his feet, his face a mess of confusion and burgeoning rage. "Catherine, what in God's name are you doing here?" he hissed, trying to keep his voice low, to contain the escalating disaster. "You're making a scene. This is a private matter." Catherine finally turned her gaze to him. The look in her eyes was one he had never seen before. The warmth, the tolerance, the quiet forbearance. It was all gone. In its place was a chilling clarity, the dispassionate focus of a master jeweler inspecting a flawed stone. "A private matter?" she repeated, her voice still level, but now laced with a potent irony. "You got down on one knee in a room full of people, with cameras flashing, to propose to your mistress using a ring I designed for our 20th wedding anniversary. You made this public, Jonathan. I'm just here to add a little context." The word mistress landed like a physical blow. Penelope flinched, her face flushing with a deep, painful scarlet. The whispers in the room grew louder, more fevered. Mr. Bartholomew, at his corner table, leaned forward, his expression now one of intense, grim fascination. Sam stepped forward slightly, positioning herself to the side, her phone now in her hand, discreetly recording. Not for social media, but for evidence. Catherine had planned every move. This was not a crime of passion. It was a calculated, strategic demolition. The architect had arrived, and she was about to show everyone the fatal flaws in the foundation of the life her husband had built. Jonathan, regaining a sliver of his bravado, tried to seize control. "Catherine, you're being hysterical. You're overwrought. Let's go home and discuss this." He reached for her arm, a gesture of command disguised as concern. Catherine moved her arm away with a motion so fluid and final, it was as if he had touched air. "Don't," she said, the single word sharp enough to make him recoil. "We have nothing to discuss at home. Everything that needs to be said will be said right here." She turned her attention back to Penelope, who looked as if she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Catherine's voice softened, but not with sympathy, with the detached tone of a professor explaining a complex but tragic theorem. "That ring," she began, gesturing towards the box Jonathan still clutched in his trembling hand, "is called the Star of Serenity. The central stone is a 15.2 carat, fancy vivid blue diamond, internally flawless. My father acquired the rough stone in Botswana over 30 years ago. He never cut it because he was waiting for the right inspiration." She paused, letting the history of the stone sink in. This was not just a product off a shelf. It was a legacy. "I designed that setting myself. Every detail has a meaning. Do you see the interwoven platinum bands?" She looked at Penelope, forcing the younger woman to meet her gaze. They were meant to represent two separate lives twisting together to become stronger. The 19 smaller diamonds embedded along the band, one for each year of our marriage. The hidden sapphire on the inside of the band is my birthstone. I designed it as an anniversary gift. For my husband. From me. Each sentence was a perfectly aimed blow, dismantling Penelope's fantasy piece by piece. The ring on which she had pinned all her hopes was not a symbol of her future, but an artifact of a marriage she had helped destroy. It was a stolen heirloom. Penelope looked from the ring to Jonathan, her eyes wide with accusation. "You told me you had it commissioned for me," she whispered, her voice cracking. Jonathan sputtered. I did. Catherine, you're twisting things. This is a malicious lie. A lie? Catherine's voice sharpened. Sam! Sam stepped forward, holding her tablet. On the screen was a crystal-clear image of Catherine's original, hand-drawn design sketches for the Star of Serenity. They were dated, signed K. Reyes, and watermarked. The original design schematics, dated 2 years ago, Sam announced crisply, along with the GIA certification for the stone, which lists the Reyes family trust as the original owner. Catherine continued, her focus now lasered onto Jonathan. And as for how you commissioned it, let's talk about that. You didn't buy this ring, Jonathan. You stole it. That's slander, he snarled, his face contorting with rage. Is it? Catherine's calm was terrifying. You used your executive discretionary fund to authorize a promotional transfer of the ring from the master vault to your possession. The transaction, number 7274B1, was processed at 4:15 p.m. 3 days ago. The stated purpose was for a showcase at a potential investor event. You forged the acquisition request, bypassing the standard multi-signature protocol required for any item valued over $1 million. You know the protocol because you wrote it. The level of detail was staggering. This wasn't an emotional outburst, it was an indictment. She was laying out a case for grand larceny in the middle of a 5-star restaurant. The value of that ring is not what you paid, because you paid nothing. Its appraised insurance value is $28.5 million, or, Catherine stated, her voice resonating in the dead silent room. You took a corporate asset, a piece of my family's history, and attempted to gift it to your mistress as a personal item. That's not just infidelity, Jonathan. That's embezzlement. That's fraud. Penelope let out a small, choked sob. Her dream had curdled into a sordid, criminal conspiracy. She looked at the diamond, and it no longer looked beautiful. It looked like evidence. It felt heavy, tainted, a millstone that could drag her down with him. Jonathan was cornered. His bluster had evaporated, leaving behind the raw panic of a man whose carefully constructed world was imploding in real time. He looked around the room, at the faces of his peers, his investors, his friends. He saw no support, only shock, disgust, and the cold, unforgiving judgment of his social and financial equals. Mr. Bartholomew was slowly shaking his head, a look of profound disappointment on his aged face. You, Jonathan stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Catherine. You will regret this. I built this company while you were hiding in your workshop. A humorless smile touched Catherine's lips. That is the biggest lie of all, she said, her voice dropping, becoming intensely personal. You didn't build anything, Jonathan. You were the auctioneer. I was the artist. You sold the paintings. I bled the paint onto the canvas. You took the credit for my work, for my father's legacy. You thought I was a silent partner you could control. You thought I was just a name. But you forgot something. She took a step closer, her eyes boring into his. My name is on the building. My name is on the box. And my name is on every single share that gives you the power you so arrogantly flaunt. You are an employee, Jonathan, and your performance review is long overdue. The finality of Catherine's words hung in the air like the silence after a lightning strike. The illusion of Jonathan Davenport, the master of the universe, the charismatic CEO, had been utterly and irrevocably shattered. He was left exposed, a common thief and an adulterer, stripped of his power and prestige in front of the very audience he had sought to impress. The room, which had been buzzing with whispers, fell into a profound, uncomfortable quiet. The only sound was the distant clatter of a dropped fork from the kitchen. No one dared to speak. They were witnesses to a complete and total annihilation, executed with the cold precision of a surgeon. Jonathan's face cycled through a series of emotions: rage, denial, fear, and finally, a pathetic, pleading desperation. "Catherine, please," he whispered, the sound pathetic in the vast silence. "Not here. We can fix this." "There is nothing to fix," Catherine stated flatly. Her gaze was unflinching. "You broke it. And I don't repair broken things, Jonathan. I melt them down and create something new." It was then that Penelope made her move. With trembling hands, she reached up to her ear, unhooking a pair of diamond earrings, a gift from Jonathan last month. She placed them quietly on the table. Then she slipped off a delicate diamond bracelet, a birthday present. It joined the earrings. Her movements were jerky, frantic. She was shedding the gilded skin he had given her, desperate to distance herself from his toxicity, from the impending wreckage. Finally, she looked at the Star of Serenity, still in its box in Jonathan's hand. She wouldn't even touch it. She looked at Jonathan, her face a mask of revulsion and betrayal. "You used me," she said, her voice thick with tears. "You told me she was nobody. You told me this was our future. It was. It is," Jonathan pleaded, turning to her. But his words were hollow. "No," Penelope said, shaking her head as she backed away from the table. "This is your mess. I want no part of it." With a final, mortified glance at Catherine, she turned and fled, weaving through the tables of stunned onlookers and disappearing out the front door, her emerald dress a streak of colour vanishing into the night. She left her glass of champagne, her half-eaten meal, and her entire fantasy life behind on the table. Jonathan was now truly alone. He stood, a pariah at his own party, clutching the multi-million-dollar ring that had become a symbol of his ruin. He turned his fury back to Catherine. "You think you can just waltz in here and ruin me? I am the CEO of Reyes Jewels. I have contracts. I have a board." "About that," Catherine interrupted smoothly. "As the majority shareholder, holding 75% of the voting stock, which I inherited directly from my father, and which our prenuptial agreement, which you called a mere formality, keeps securely in my name, I have the authority to call an emergency session of the board. In fact, I did so an hour ago, via a secure video conference." Sam held up her tablet again. This time, it showed the faces of the 4 other board members in a live video call, each looking grim and resolute. "They've all seen the preliminary evidence of your financial malfeasance, Jonathan," Catherine continued, her tone chillingly professional. "They've seen the unauthorized transfer logs. They've also been made aware of the blatant misuse of company assets for personal gain, which constitutes a severe breach of your fiduciary duty and your employment contract. As of 5 minutes ago, the board voted unanimously. Your position as CEO of Reyes Jewels is terminated, effective immediately. Your corporate accounts have been frozen. The security codes to your office have been changed. The locks on our home will be changed within the hour." 2 large, imposing men in dark suits who had entered the restaurant discreetly a few moments earlier now stepped forward. They were not restaurant security. They had the hard, professional look of a private corporate security detail. Sam had summoned them. "These gentlemen will escort you off the premises," Catherine said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Your personal effects from the office will be couriered to a location of your choosing. You are no longer welcome in any Reyes Jewels establishment. You are no longer welcome in my life." One of the security men gently but firmly took the velvet box from Jonathan's nerveless grasp and handed it to Catherine. She accepted it without a word. Jonathan stared at her, his mouth agape. He was defeated. He had no moves left to make. The empire he had boasted of building had cast him out. The woman he had dismissed as a fragile artist had checkmated him in public. He was nothing. As the security guards flanked him and began to lead him towards the exit, he shot one last, venomous look at Catherine. "You'll be nothing without me. You'll run it into the ground." Catherine simply watched him go, her expression serene. The crowd parted as the disgraced CEO was escorted out like a common criminal. When the door swung shut behind him, a collective breath was released. The performance was over. Catherine stood for a moment, the velvet box in her hand. Then she turned to the stunned room. She looked directly at Mr. Bartholomew, who raised his wine glass in a silent, respectful toast. Catherine gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. Then she addressed the room. "My apologies for the interruption," she said, her voice calm and strong. "Please enjoy your evening. And don't forget to give generously to the Gems of the City Fund. The arts are a worthy investment." With that, she turned, and with Sam at her side, she walked out of the restaurant, leaving behind the wreckage of her old life to step into the dawn of her new one. 6 months later, the air in the Reyes Jewels flagship store on Fifth Avenue was electric. The scandal at La Lanterne d'Or had become the stuff of New York legend, a tale of corporate intrigue and personal justice that had paradoxically been the best publicity the brand could have ever hoped for. The story wasn't just about a cheating husband. It was about the quiet, brilliant woman who had reclaimed her throne. Catherine Reyes was no longer the reclusive artist behind the brand. She was its fierce, celebrated heart. The store was packed for the unveiling of her newest collection, the Phoenix. It was her first solo collection as both Chief Creative Officer and CEO, and the industry was watching with bated breath. They were not disappointed. The pieces were bold, innovative, and deeply personal. They spoke of fire, of rebirth, of strength forged in adversity. Critics raved, calling it her masterwork. Sales had skyrocketed. Catherine had not just saved her company from her husband. She had made it more successful than ever. Jonathan Davenport had faded into obscurity. Mired in lawsuits and facing federal fraud charges, he had become a social and professional pariah. His name was a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. Penelope Vance had reportedly moved back to Ohio, her New York ambitions reduced to ash. In her private workshop, the one place that had always been her sanctuary, Catherine stood before her workbench. The chaos of the past few months had settled, and she was left with a profound sense of peace and purpose. Sam came in, holding 2 flutes of champagne. "To the Phoenix," Sam said, handing Catherine a glass. "We've already sold out of the centerpiece necklace. A Saudi princess bought it over the phone." Catherine smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile. "To the Phoenix," she echoed, clinking her glass against Sam's. "And to good friends who bring you champagne and help you stage corporate coups." They both laughed, a warm, easy sound. After Sam left, Catherine turned her attention to a velvet tray on her bench. On it lay the Star of Serenity. For months, she hadn't been able to look at it. It was a monument to her pain, a symbol of the deepest betrayal. She had considered selling it, breaking it down, locking it away forever. But that would be letting Jonathan win. It would mean he had succeeded in tainting it. Her father had taught her that every stone has a story. This stone's story had taken a dark turn, but she was the author, and she could write a new chapter. With the careful, practiced hands of a master, she began to work. She removed the magnificent blue diamond from its setting, the platinum band, the one meant to symbolize their intertwined lives, she placed into a crucible. She turned up the flame of her torch and watched as the metal that represented 19 years of lies softened, glowed, and melted into a formless, liquid silver pool. It was a catharsis. She spent the next few weeks redesigning. She took the 19 smaller diamonds, the ones that had marked each year of their marriage, and set them into a new piece. A magnificent brooch in the shape of a rising phoenix, its wings spread wide. It was a gift for Sam, a thank you for her unwavering loyalty. The Star of Serenity diamond itself she set into a new, singular piece. Not a ring to be given by a man, but a pendant. The design was simple, powerful, and utterly modern. The diamond was now the heart of a stylized star, its platinum points sharp and clean. It was no longer a symbol of a partnership, but a declaration of a single, brilliant entity. It was a symbol of her own light, her own resilience. It was no longer the Star of Serenity. She renamed it the Polaris, the North Star, constant, true, and a guide for one's own journey. She clasped the finished pendant around her own neck. It lay cool against her skin. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, not at a woman who had survived, but at a woman who had triumphed. The pain was a part of her story, a facet that had been cut into her, but it no longer defined her. It had simply added to her brilliance. Her legacy was not just her father's, and it was certainly not Jonathan's. It was hers, reclaimed and reforged in fire. And as the blue diamond on her chest caught the light, it sparkled with the promise of a future that was entirely and beautifully her own. A year had passed since the night at La Lanterne d'Or, a year of rebuilding, not just a company, but a life. The penthouse, once a monument to a shared and hollow success, was now entirely Catherine's. She had stripped it of Jonathan's heavy, masculine aesthetic, replacing dark woods and somber leathers with clean lines, soft textures, and an abundance of light. It was no longer a showroom, but a home, filled with art that inspired her, and silence that comforted her. One cool autumn evening, as a gentle rain whispered against the vast floor-to-ceiling windows, Catherine was reviewing the preliminary sketches for the next spring collection. The Polaris pendant, her personal emblem of victory, lay against her silk blouse, a familiar, cool weight. Her work was her joy now, unburdened by the need to please or accommodate anyone but her own creative vision. The company was stronger than ever, its narrative of authenticity and female strength resonating with a new generation of clients. The intercom buzzed, a harsh intrusion into the tranquility. She frowned, not expecting anyone. It was Wesley, the stern but protective doorman who had worked in the building for 2 decades. "Mrs. Reyes," his voice was strained, apologetic. "I am so sorry to disturb you. There is a man here, a Mr. Davenport. He is asking to see you. I told him you are not accepting visitors, but he is insistent." Catherine's blood ran cold for a single, fleeting moment. Jonathan. The name felt alien, a relic from a past life. She hadn't seen or heard from him since his unceremonious exit from the restaurant. His lawyers had communicated with hers, a sterile and bitter exchange that had finalized their divorce and settled the criminal charges with a plea deal that involved hefty fines and a permanent ban from the financial industry. He had, for all intents and purposes, ceased to exist in her world. "Wesley, you know my instructions," she said, her voice steady. "Yes, ma'am, I do. But he says it is a matter of life and death. He looks unwell, Mrs. Reyes. I would not have called otherwise." A part of her, the logical, self-protective part championed by Sam, screamed to refuse, to have Wesley call security and have him removed. But another, deeper part of her felt a strange sense of obligation, not to him, but to the woman she was now. A queen does not hide from ghosts. She faces them, and by facing them, banishes them from her kingdom for good. This was the final piece of unfinished business. "It's all right, Wesley," she said, her decision made. "Send him up." A few minutes later, the chime of the private elevator announced his arrival. Catherine stood in the center of her living room, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. When the doors slid open, the man who stepped out was a grotesque caricature of the Jonathan she had known. The impeccable Tom Ford suits were gone, replaced by a rumpled, ill-fitting blazer. His face was gaunt, his skin had a pasty, unhealthy pallor, and the confident gleam in his eyes had been replaced by a haunted, desperate flicker. He was a man hollowed out from the inside, the architecture of his arrogance having collapsed, leaving only a ruin. He stopped, taking in the transformed apartment. "You've changed the place," he murmured, his voice raspy. "I have," Catherine replied, her tone neutral. "What do you want, Jonathan?" He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes pleading. "Catherine, I know I have no right to be here. I know I am the last person on earth you want to see." He wrung his hands, a nervous, pathetic gesture. "But I had to see you. To tell you I am sorry." Catherine remained silent, her expression unchanging. She had learned that a man like Jonathan only ever used the word sorry as a key to unlock a door he wanted to walk through. He seemed to take her silence as an invitation to continue. "I was a fool, Cat, a blind, arrogant fool. I had everything. We had everything. I let my ego, this chase for more, I let it poison me. And that woman, Penelope, she was nothing. A symptom of the disease, not the cause. A mistake. A terrible, meaningless mistake." He was trying to weave a narrative of a good man who had lost his way, hoping to appeal to a well of sympathy he assumed must still exist. He had always underestimated her. "I'm ruined, Catherine," he said, his voice cracking. "My reputation, my career, it's all gone. I have nothing. I needed to look you in the eye and tell you that I know what I lost. I lost you." Catherine finally spoke, her voice as calm and clear as the rain against the window. "What you lost, Jonathan, was a source of income. You lost a brand you could take credit for. You lost a wife who was convenient and quiet. You never had me. Not really. Because to have someone, you have to see them. And you never saw me. You saw a name, a legacy, an asset. You saw a walking, talking vault of intellectual property you could exploit." He flinched as if she had slapped him. "That's not true." "Isn't it?" she countered, taking a small step forward. "Your apology isn't about the pain you caused me. It's about the consequences you are suffering. You're not sorry for the betrayal. You're sorry you got caught. You're not here for my forgiveness. You're here for some kind of absolution so you can sleep at night. Or perhaps you're here for a handout." His desperate eyes gave him away. That was the core of it. He was broken, and he had come back to the person he had broken, hoping she had a spare part for him. "I don't hate you, Jonathan," she said, and the words surprised him. They surprised her a little, too. Hate requires passion. It requires energy. And you are no longer worth my energy. When I look at you, I don't feel anger. I feel a profound pity. You had a seat at a banquet, and you chose to steal the silverware instead. You'll never understand what you truly threw away. She walked to the door of the apartment and held it open, a clear, final gesture. He looked at her, at the magnificent apartment, at the glittering city beyond the windows, a world he was no longer a part of. He saw the Polaris pendant at her throat, a stone he had tried to steal, now worn as her personal badge of honor. He saw a woman he had never known, a woman forged into steel in the fire he had set. Defeated, he shuffled past her without another word and stepped back into the elevator. Catherine watched as the doors slid shut, sealing him away. She closed the door to her home, the click of the latch echoing in the quiet room. It was the sound of the final sentence of the final chapter of a long and painful book. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel sad. She felt light. The last echo of the lie was gone. The ghost was banished. She walked back to the window, looking down at the endless tapestry of lights that was New York City. It was her city, her business, her life. And for the first time, with no shadows of the past lurking at her door, it was entirely and completely hers to command. That night at the restaurant wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the birth of an icon. Catherine Reyes reminded us that a person's true worth is never defined by someone else's betrayal. It's defined by how they rise from the ashes. Jonathan thought he was taking everything from her, but he only succeeded in giving her back the one thing he had stolen over the years: her own power. Her story is a powerful testament to the fact that sometimes the most devastating moments of our lives are just setting the stage for our greatest comeback. What did you think of Catherine's ultimate power move? Could you have been as calm and calculated as she was? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this story of justice and empowerment, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that will leave you breathless. Thank you for listening.